Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the San Fernando Valley Climate Reality Chapter meeting. My name is Diana Wynand, and I am chair of the chapter. We have a terrific program tonight, and we do like to get started by sharing a land acknowledgement and sharing some of the other things that we're doing in our chapter. So we're going to go ahead and I am going to introduce let's see. I'm going to introduce Rhonda Plank-Richard. She is a chapter member since, Rhonda, 2019 or 20? I mean, it's been quite a while, hasn't it? And Rhonda's a third grade teacher and LAUSD climate champion for her West Hill School. They're competing for the LAUSD Heroes for Zero Prize. She's also co-leader of the Emerson Unitarian Environmental Justice Ministry in Canoga Park and a volunteer ambassador for the Switch is On electrification program. So first of all, Rhonda, thank you for being in our chapter. You are such a robust member, and we really are appreciative of you being here. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen as Rhonda reads our land acknowledgement. Go ahead, Rhonda.
A land acknowledgement is a formal statement that recognizes and respects Indigenous peoples as stewards of this land and the enduring relationship that exists between Indigenous peoples and their traditional territories. It acknowledges the history that has brought us to reside on this land, the colonialism that is present in our current systems, and calls on us to be mindful of our own present participation in it. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Tongva, Quiche, Tataviam, and Chumash tribes.
Thank you very much, Rhonda. Appreciate that. And next we are going to, I'm going to introduce Vivian Deutsch, our outreach coordinator. And Vivian is going to tell you a little bit about who we are and our parent organization and how you can become more involved. Vivian?
Okay, so we do this at the beginning of every meeting because there are lots of people that are on our mailing list, but they're not yet signed up for the national and international climate reality. We're a local chapter, but we belong to this other incredible large organization that was founded by Vice President Al Gore, and which does amazing stuff. We do it here locally, but the bigger climate reality does stuff all over the world and all over our country, and they run trainings. Andrew, who's on the line with us, is going to go and mentor in the upcoming training in New York. So when you sign on to the larger climate reality, you widen your scope. You widen your scope of information. You also get notified when Al Gore is talking, which is always very worth hearing, and all kinds of other good stuff. So we highly recommend that even if you're on our mailing list, you go to this website and you click, Diana will put the link in the chat. It's totally free, doesn't cost money, doesn't obligate you to anything. All it does is give you a window into the larger climate reality, and it allows you to also share our pride in belonging to the larger organization.
Thank you, Vivian. That's great. Just a few words before I turn it over to Kathy to introduce our guest tonight. And that is, while our speaker is going to speak, we're going to turn the chat off just out of respect so that we can all listen and focus on her presentation. And then as she finishes, we'll turn the chat back on and we invite you to put your questions into the chat and we will voice them for you and be able to continue the conversation with our guests. So please mute everyone, and I'm going to change the chat and turn it over to Kathy to introduce our guest.
Okay, sorry, 1 second. Here we go. So we are very excited and honored to have Nicole Horseherder with us tonight. She is one of the original founding members and the current executive director of oh gosh, I knew I was going to mess this up. Nizhóní Ání. Nicole, you'll help me fix this. Nizhóní Ání, which means Sacred Water Speaks. It was established in 2000 to address the waste and misuse of groundwater by the coal industry on Black Mesa in Northeast Arizona Navajo Tribal Lands. Nicole began her work with Nizhóní Ání as an outreach coordinator, interpreting hydrology and legal documents for communities fighting the impacts of coal mines. The mines and generating stations have been decommissioned, but Nicole has continued her efforts toward the promise of reclamation and restoration of tribal lands and water, and a transition to renewable energy. In 2023, she was the recipient of the prestigious Heinz Award for the Environment. We are very happy to welcome Nicole Horseherder this evening.
Great.
Thank you very much. I appreciate this. I'd like to begin my journey here this evening with everyone by saying that the Southwest is experiencing many changes, and this, I think, can be said throughout the United States. Coal in the Southwest is facing dramatic changes. It's a system that has exploited Navajo and Hopi lands for the past 50 years, as well as the water resources. But now, for economic reasons, utilities all across the Southwest are either closing or planning on closing coal generation facilities and coal mines. And sometimes they don't give a whole lot of notice, as with one particular one, the Navajo Generating Station, which was located just in the northeast corner of Arizona. These changes are something that communities are having to deal with on many different levels. Mostly the impacts that I think are reported the most are economic impacts. And one last thing that I think we've noticed in doing this work is that economic and energy transition cannot be solved simply by replacing coal with solar. And especially if you're continuing an old and exploitive system that got us to this point in the first place. One of the things that we have to do as we're transitioning, the energy, is that we have to look at other forms of structures. Also, we have to look at this whole transition in a holistic way. I want to just, so we're already at our next slide. So this is just a slide to show what life is like on Black Mesa. So I've kind of just interwoven a lot of home slides along with slides that I want to talk about. This is just an annual horse ride that that a lot of young people and older folks get together and do. So the horses are still very much a mode of transportation on Black Mesa. Black Mesa is the high plateau in northeast Arizona. It is where I live. It's like a micro ecosystem on its own, and it's also home to one of the last coal mining operations in Arizona. And for a long time, it was the only coal mine. It was the home to the only coal mining operation in Arizona. So next slide, please.
Not getting it to go. Sorry, there we go.
Yeah, so this is what strip mining looks like on Black Mesa. It is massive. I recently took a trip to Appalachia and I got to see what mountaintop removal looks like. Well, they took a look at my slides and they said, oh my God, that is humongous. And, you know, I agree. It's big, and it's pretty terrifying when you look at how much topsoil has been removed just to get the coal out from underneath. But go ahead, next slide. Oh dear. Yeah, so this is just
Sorry, did I mic going the wrong way?
Yeah, no, it's good. So in the Southwest, we have in our region, we have 4 coal-fired power plants. The one on that's showing on the left side is the Navajo Generating Station. And that stopped operating in 2019, and it had an exclusive relationship with coal mining on Black Mesa. The one next to that one is the San Juan Generating Station, and it is located in northwest New Mexico, and it just recently closed last year. And then and the third slide shows Four Corners Power Plant, another massive coal-fired power plant using Navajo coal, the coal mined on Navajo lands in New Mexico. And so and then we have Cholla Power Plant on the end there, which is, so the first 3 are these power plants that were located up in what's generally called the Four Corners region. So it's in the northern side of the Navajo Nation, from the very northwestern side to the northeastern side of the Navajo Nation. So I don't know if you know, but the Navajo Nation spans into New Mexico, and there's a little sliver of the Navajo Nation in Utah, and then the Navajo Nation has a ranch in Colorado as well. So the power plant that's shown on the far right side is the Cholla Power Plant, and it sits on the southern edge of the Navajo Reservation. The Navajo Reservation is 27,000 square miles. Next slide. So I want to talk about 3 things, and we deal with many different parts of transition as we're moving away from these power plants that have closed and are closing. We are focused on 3 main things. One is water. The other is transition support. And finally, we are focused and have a lot on decommissioning and reclamation. Next slide. So one of the things about just transition or transition, and I often use that interchangeably, but I think it's important to know that if I am say talking about this to regulatory commissioners, I have to make sure that I'm saying just equitable transition, and probably that's something that I would like to be doing in every conversation that I'm having. And it's really important because in just equitable transition, we're talking about what's the thing that's coming next after coal mining, and how we want that thing that's coming next to look, and what is the relationship going to be between this project, this thing that comes next, and the communities, the host communities that have to deal with this new project, that have to look at it every day and have to share, resources with this thing. So one of the things that we are talking about, especially in places where coal-fired power plants have come down and are coming down, is replacement power and transmission. So in the case of the Navajo Generating Station, we have a power plant that generated about 2,250 megawatts a year and this power was delivered not only to Arizona, where the power plant was located, but also to Nevada and California. And so the owners of the Navajo Generating Station own the transmission lines in about the same ratio as they own the power plant. And so when we're talking about replacement power, we're talking about utilities that still own the transmission lines in about the same percentage as they own the power plant. For instance, Salt River Project, which is a quasi-Navajo utility government facility, owned the Navajo Generating Station in about 21%. And so that means that it owns the transmission lines that are now idle from the closed plant in about the same percentage. The Los Angeles Department of Water and Power owned a portion of the Navajo Generating Station. While it decided to sell its shares back in 2000, I want to say 2015, I might be wrong on that date, sorry about that. They still own the transmission lines today, which is equivalent to about 400 megawatts, okay? So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to, as this coal plant closed and went away, we're trying to bring back the utilities and say, hey, you've got idle transmission lines. Let's use those transmission lines to put renewable energy. Come back and partner with the Navajo Nation. Let's put renewable energy on those transmission lines, and you buy it, or you help us find a buyer for that renewable energy. So this is the idea. And one of the reasons this is so important is, one, you've got idle transmission lines that are terribly valuable and are not going to be part of decommissioning. So while usually the owner operator, while they have the responsibility of tearing down or demolishing the assets that were at the power plant, they are busy focusing on reclaiming the site where the power plant is. Any holding ponds, any coal ash waste that's there, any other facilities that are there, they're focused on decommissioning, cleaning up, and getting it into a certain standard so that it can be handed back over to the Navajo Nation, in this case, the Navajo Nation. However, the transmission lines, because of how valuable they are not going to be part of that the decommissioning. So this is one of our priorities, is to make sure that idle transmission lines end up getting connected to renewable energy, or they become the transmission for renewable energy and not anything else. And this is super important. This is like priority one. Putting renewable energy cleans up the air and it saves the water sources, because I don't know if any of you know, but coal-fired power plants use a terrible amount of water. And for us in the upper basin, being along the upper basin Colorado River in Arizona, this power plant, the Navajo Generating Station, at one time used 34,100 acre feet of water annually. That's a lot of water. So, two things we get out of it is that we're putting renewable energy on the line, and we're saving and protecting the water sources. The thing that we have to be careful of is if we don't push this kind of transition, if we don't make this a priority in our transition efforts, it's very likely that another company pushing some other type of energy generation will beat us to those transmission lines. And that is a real threat. And so we want to stay on top of this and make sure that that those transmission lines end up with carrying renewable energy. Next slide, please.
Uh-oh. Not happening. There it goes. Is that it?
Yeah, so stakeholder support is another little aspect of just transition, and that is bringing stakeholders back to the table to talk about what transition looks like. So transition can look, have many forms, can be a lot of different things, but one of the things that I think is that we've run into, especially in Arizona, and yeah, I won't go any further than that. But Arizona is a special state. Just transition is not something that people can wrap their heads around, especially legislatures and other decision makers, like people like utility commissioners. So it's been about 3 years now that we've been coming to the utility regulators in Arizona and talking about transition and why that's so important. And because they are the regulatory body over utilities in Arizona, we essentially have to get their permission in order for utilities to part with any kind of direct transition support for the Navajo Nation. And more importantly, for areas that have been directly impacted by these coal-fired power plants and coal mining. So we are working with utilities and talking about just transition and how important that is, and trying to figure out creative ways in which the nation and coal impacted communities can benefit from transition support directly from the utilities. Another way we're doing it is, like direct benefits. Usually we're talking about money, but another way that we can achieve transition support from utilities is a commitment to build out renewable energy projects on tribal lands, and or to partner with tribal governments while they're doing that. The state legislature is another place where we've made a little bit of headway. Especially in this administration, we were able to get the state legislatures to set aside a little bit of money for coal impacted communities. And we actually just got done writing a grant for those monies that were set aside. The state governor, another place where we can get direct appropriations for transition support. Yeah, so these are some places where we're focusing our time and attention to make sure that assets that are still there and available get used for renewable energy projects. So we're all kind of directing people in the same direction of just transition. Next slide, please. Water is another aspect of our just transition campaigning, and that is that, especially in the state of Arizona, and this is global wide, but in Arizona especially, we are in a water crisis. And when you go to the city of Phoenix, you might not think we're in a water crisis. You've got man-made lakes everywhere. You've got canals full of water everywhere. You've got people boating on all these fake, these man-made lakes, these golf courses. Well, in Northeast Arizona, where I'm from, much of the waters that much of Navajo's both surface water and groundwater has been used for the last 5 decades to support the coal industry, and that has had tremendous impacts on our nation, our communities. Basically, we committed, the use of the upper basin Colorado River for the Navajo Generating Station, which prohibited any development of that water for both the communities and businesses on Navajo. So, if you come to Arizona and come to Navajo lands, and people still have black running water, and businesses sitting outside the city of Page, where the NGS plant used to be, don't have plumbing, it's because we were not allowed to develop the water while NGS was in operation. Water is a priority, and we have to keep talking about how important it is and how important it is to prioritize it, and to not use it for it should not be used for future industry use anymore. Even to Navajo leadership, every leadership, utility leadership, everybody. You would be surprised, people who get elected to be elected to positions of the legislature, the governor's office, utilities who control a lot of the energy throughout the state. You can't just assume these people know what they're doing, and you can't just assume these people have a really good bird's eye view of what's happening. We have to keep talking about these things. Next slide, please. One of the other kind of hidden focuses of our group is reclamation, decommissioning and reclamation. I never hear, when I'm interfacing or if I'm talking to people from other environmental organizations, I hardly ever hear about this as being one of the strategies. And for us, because so much of our lands have been mined, Peabody had a lease area of over 60,000 acres. That's a huge area that they had a lease on, and mined probably 60% of that. And so we're very focused on what reclamation is going to look like and what water reclamation on those lands look like. It's simple. The foundation of economic development is clean water and land. So keep reminding federal agencies who are offering grants, state agencies who are offering grants, that land reclamation done right and water reclamation done right is actually the foundation of economic development. And if we're going to look at reusing the 60,000 acres, and people still live in the lease area, if we're going to look at some serious economic development in these places that have been tremendously impacted by coal mining, then we're definitely going to treat this as economic development, reclamation as economic development. Next slide, please. Just a couple more slides. On the left side is another shot of the Navajo Generating Station, which is now closed. The shot on the right is a picture of what was the Black Mesa pipeline, and we ended the pipeline in 2005, but this particular operation on Black Mesa, there were once two mines on Black Mesa, the Black Mesa mine and the Kayenta mine. The Black Mesa mine was associated with the Mojave Generating Station, which Southern Cal Edison was the owner operator. And this plant sat in Laughlin, Nevada for about 35 years. But the way that the generating station got its coal was through a slurry pipeline. So about 4,400 to 6,000 acre feet of water from Black Mesa groundwater, pristine Black Mesa groundwater, was used to slurry pulverize coal to the generating station for a good 35 years. And thank God that we put an end to that, because that was just an enormous amount of good drinking water that we just flushed down that pipeline just to push coal. So I wanted to just share that tidbit with you. Next slide, please. A lot of what we do is, we do a lot of policy work. We do a lot of meetings with stakeholders, like we intervene at the Corporation Commission. But deep down, our foundation and our roots is still with our community. We are still grassroots based. We never forget where we come from. And so these pictures just show how mobilizing the community is still at the heart of what we do. Next slide, please. And then we do a lot of media. There was an abandoned trading post outside of Flagstaff, and we just decided to put up an art project. And the slide, or the little the Mark Lazary Avenue Capitol is Killing Navajo Future, is actually a poster board that we created and took with us to New York when Avenue Capitol tried to buy Navajo Generating Station. So the work that organizations like Nizhóní do is just really important. Otherwise, you'll get coal-fired power plants that are at the end of their life that should come down, but you'll get these owner-operators willing to consider selling or transferring those old ancient assets to other companies like Avenue Capital, which is what happened to us. So even though the owners of Navajo Generating Station announced closure in 2017, they spent the next year and a half entertaining the idea of transferring or selling the Navajo Generating Station to somebody else who wanted to continue operating coal. So Nizhóní Ání, it was a crucial part of making sure that NGS shut down for good and moved to decommissioning and remediation. Next slide, please. Again, more slides showing that we are out in the countryside. We are in local government facilities, local town halls. We are on the move. And we can have a meeting anywhere. It doesn't have to be inside the town hall, which is, there's one located in every community. It can be on the way to our Navajo Nation capital, which is a 4-day horse ride from Black Mesa. And we've been doing it every 5 years for the last 25 years. So yeah, and it's a good way to get kids involved in the future of their nation, and the protection of their resources. And we involve everyone. Next slide, please. The thing that I think the young people do the best at, and they really get it, is the radio, is the messaging. So I, time and time again, look to the young folks to really get the message out there about why it's important to transition to renewable energy, and why it's important to protect the water. Next slide, please. And another shot of some of the actions that we've taken and the events that we've hosted. Next slide, please. And that's it for my slide presentation, and I can answer any questions.
Perfect. Thank you. Let me just
Thank you so much. Yeah, Nicole. I'm going to turn on the chat now. So everybody can, if you have a question for Nicole, go ahead and put it into the chat. In the meantime, I think Kathy has some questions that we're going to kick off with.
Thank you, Nicole. That was great. I do have some starter kind of questions while everybody else is putting their questions in the chat. You've been doing this a long time. What are the biggest obstacles that you've met, and what do you think are the biggest successes that you've achieved since you started this whole journey?
So there are a lot of obstacles. One of the biggest obstacles I would say is the federal agencies. So when industry is operating on native lands, it's not just, you know, like in many states, if there's a coal-fired power plant or coal mining happening, usually it's the state agencies that have policies in place and determine what, say, how reclamation should happen, or, you know, like what kind of permits a company needs to operate, and does a lot of the monitoring. Well, for indigenous lands, the state agencies are kind of step aside, and it's the federal agencies that come and do all of that, do the permitting and the monitoring, and decide what, like in this case of NGS, what reclamation should look like. So the problem that we have, and I just feel like state agencies move faster, but state agencies also probably don't have as stringent policy as perhaps federal agencies do. But our problem with federal agencies, who we fall under on indigenous lands, is that they move terribly slow. And there is this hierarchy or this chain of communication that they absolutely are adamant about, and that is this thing called government to government relationship. So, you know, years ago when I first started this work, I had a rude awakening when I drove all the way to Denver, which is like over like about 10-hour drive, and went to the Office of Surface Mining there, and I had a complaint about how much water they were using, and they told me, we have a government to government relationship with the Navajo Nation. Any problem you have, you take it up with the Navajo Nation, they will come to us, and that's how this works. So it's just the added layers to getting some issue addressed or heard. That's the problem. And so a lot of times what we end up having to do is use the media twice as much, protest twice as loud, have, you know, lawyers that are twice as aggressive. Really, we, as indigenous activists, you have to know your shit. You just have to know what something should look like and what some reclamation policy actually says. Like you have to know all the lease agreements and what it says. And so it just, I feel like we just work twice as hard to get the same thing. And a lot of times we don't even get a response from the federal agencies. And just to give you an idea of something recent, you know, we've been working about the last 3 years and really talking about something called significant permit revision, and saying that that's what Black Mesa needs. Because, and so just trying to make this short, I met with the Department of Interior's Assistant Secretary, who oversees OSM at the federal level, who then told me, you have a regional director, go see them. I went to see the regional director. So I started working with the regional director, and 2 months went by and that regional director was replaced. I then got the new regional director up to speed, and 6 months went by and that regional director was transferred somewhere else. So we have yet to sit down with the new regional director, but one of the things that I said to, and now I forget his name, boy, Brian, he's the secretary at the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I'm so sorry, I forgot his name. But he came to Flagstaff and came to NAU, and this is where we took it up with him, and we said, look, we were in DC last year, and we came to your office at the Department of Interior, and we wanted to see you, but you told us that we need to work our way up the chain of command and start with our regional director. Well, your regional director has been replaced now 3 times. We want to speak to you and you only. So just what I've said, repeat again and again. This is what Indigenous organizing looks like, especially if you have to talk to federal agencies. That's the biggest challenge. And the other question was, what is the success? Was that the other question? The success, I think, is bringing to light the problems that people didn't know existed. For example, the Office of Surface Mining and Peabody have been working quite diligently, probably, on reclamation at Black Mesa. Well, it turns out that the reclamation they thought they were doing is not what the people in the community within the lease area thought was adequate. So we ended up finding that we realized that we were talking about reclamation, and we were defining reclamation in 3 different ways. The Navajo Nation had a definition of what they thought reclamation should be. The community definitely had specific issues they had with reclamation, the way it was being done between the OSM and Peabody collaboration. So as an organization, we brought to light this discrepancy between the agency, the coal company, the Navajo Nation, and the community. And that really shed light on the relationships between agency and Indigenous nations. And also, it really shed light on what people's or agency, what the standards are out there. You know, the agency was fine allowing Peabody to plant some grass, some buckwheat from Indiana, all over reclaimed areas of Black Mesa. On the other hand, the community said, this is not native to Black Mesa, this is foreign. We want to see the Brahma and the Indian rice grass and the Pinstamen, and we want to see this on our lands. This is indigenous, this is native. We want to see this kind of diversity brought back to Black Mesa. So, you know, this, I believe, even though we raised this is challenging, I think this is one of the this is what makes Indigenous organizing so great, is that we really shed light on issues that no one would ever have brought up had we not tackled this issue in the first place. So I guess one step further, this is that it brings people together. it really brings people to the table to start talking about what something should look like, why something is not good. And it really gets people involved, and it gets people to take some risk ownership in what is happening out there, and not to just sit back and allow the coal company, who usually lacks reclamation expertise, to do all the work unmonitored, you know. So it really gets people involved.
Nicole, it's clear that there is so much depth to this situation, and I feel like we're only getting that, you know, an introduction to it, and you guys have certainly lived it. We have some questions in the chat. I think these are perhaps shorter questions, but let me pose them to you. One from Robert Mason: who owns the water rights of the land? Who owns the land on which the transition lines are set?
So the NGS plant used to sit on Navajo lands. The transmission, while it begins on Navajo lands, the transmission lines run, you know, all the way across the state into Nevada and California. So those transmission lines are owned by the different owners of the NGS plant. Okay. And they are Los Angeles, they are Los Angeles Water and Power. Actually, let me give it to you in the order of greatest share. Starting with the greatest share first. Bureau of Reclamation has the greatest share of NGS, and had about 500 megawatts, and gave its share to the Navajo Nation. So that's part of Just Transition too, and that's something that we really put pressure on the Bureau of Reclamation to do this. The next in line is Southern Salt River Project, had the next largest share. And then Arizona Public Service had the next largest share. And then Tucson Electric Power and the LADWP had the next share at about, I think it's like 14% and 11%. And then Nevada had the smallest share at like something like 7%. So that's the utilities, and that's how much they own the transmission lines. And the transmission lines run from where the NGS plant used to be across Arizona and Nevada and California, and wherever else, you know, these utilities run their transmission. You know, I don't know about that. And the second question was?
You answered it, actually.
Okay.
I think who owns the land on which the transition lines are set. So, Michelle, you have a question?
Yeah, there's a couple questions in the chat from Cherry Robinson. Do you have access to any of the IRA monies? And if so, can they be used to help with the just transition?
In theory, we do. The reality of it is, we are a nonprofit environmental justice organization, and very little of the funds from the IRA or the IIJA or any of the federal funds that are being made available, very little of it can be used to support our primary mission. However, we have helped organizations in coal impacted communities access some of those grant funds. Now that adds another layer of work for us, and that is that as a 501 nonprofit organization, we now, should we get any of these grants, have to build our capacity to handle federal funds. And that's not something that is part of our original mission. It's not something that we want to take up all our time. But because of the limited capacity of tribal government and tribal departments, and the limited capacity of organizations, well-established 501c3s like us might be shifting our focus or changing our focus or adding another focus to our group, our organization here in the near future. I have mixed feelings about that. I believe that with the right number of people, we can build that capacity. However, it really changes the mission of Nizhóní Ání. So the other part of the funds that are being made available by the feds is that they're making those funds available with no technical assistance. And that's really difficult. So you're getting very few indigenous tribal governments, tribal departments, and NGOs. You're getting very few. You're getting less, I think, applying for the funds than what I think was expected. And we're no different. We really need that technical assistance to help us meet the deadlines. And, you know, applying for federal funds through their application process and setting up the portal, that's not an easy thing. That's pretty, and for whatever reason, 2 years ago, I set one up for us, not knowing that this was going to happen today with all these funds coming down. So, yeah, we are applying for the funds. It's harder than people think. It's really, yeah, even tribal governments are grappling with it. They're having a hard time submitting applications on time.
A couple of other questions. Both Cherry and Francis Lee asked, what can we do to help bring your plight to light? Anything we can do to help?
What really helps is when people go to our website and look at the different projects that we have and help amplify it. So like, say if you're following us on social media, or if you reshare stuff that we have on our website, or reshare posts on Facebook, on Instagram, that really helps. The more people that follow, the more people that understand what's happening, the more people can help advocate for some of the basic things that we're advocating for, which is we need to move to renewable energy. We cannot commit any more water, especially drinking water, to industry. We have to stop now. We have to shift the way that we live. We can't expect to just, you know, consumerism comes at a price. Where's the responsibility? We can't just have lights 24/7 anymore. We've got to think differently about the way we use our water, the way we generate electricity. We have to start conserving. We are basically borrowing from the future generations at this moment in time, and we have to stop doing that, because when our future generations have no clean air, water, land to live on, then there is no future. So we've got to change the way we do things, and that starts with every individual person. You know, we've got to consume less and demand, you know, that the protection of water and the protection of the land and the protection of the air.
One final question, Nicole, we'll keep it brief. I know everybody is I'm on the East Coast. I should speak for myself. It's 11:19. But we really appreciate your time and what I think is important for us to know as activists. It's hard work. You've been doing this for years and years and years and just giving it your all. How do you maintain your focus and your effort without giving up, dealing with government?
Well, it comes at a price, that's for sure. When I first started this work, I had babies in my arms and there was nothing else for me to do except do this work, because I couldn't, I actually had to quit my job to take care of my babies and my children. And so then I ended up doing this. And it really gave me like a purpose, as if motherhood that can't give you a purpose. But I don't know, I'm colonized. I'm really messed up by this Western education system and the Western way of living. So I guess I must have not really been satisfied just to take, just to raise my children. But it was interesting stuff, and I had just gotten out of college, and so the training that I had was fresh. And so I did lots of letters and I wrote lots of stuff and read lots of reports, and it was really fascinating for me, and I really enjoyed it, actually. One of my very first jobs was to interpret the technical information for my community. So, I'm a Diné speaker first. I, don't know exactly when I started learning English, but I came home and was re-immersed in my community. So I ended up interpreting a lot of hydrological and geology data for the community so they could understand what's happening here. And so that's how my work started. It was hard because I was a volunteer for 17 years before I actually started working, actually got a salary through TNA. So I actually had a day job, an 8 to 5. After my children were school age, I had a day job and I was doing TNA stuff as my second job. So in 2017, I finally had enough money to create a position for myself. And from there, I was able to get more funding and get the support of other foundations. And now I have a staff of about 10. So it's been tremendously difficult. And it's taken a toll on my home life, my health, my financial. But I've learned that taking time off is important, and that raising the younger generations is so important. And to instill in them the importance that your water is important to you first and foremost, the air you breathe and the land you live on, and your relationship with the universe, the Father, Son, those 4 things, the elements of life, are the most important things you will ever protect in your life. No amount of money is ever going to be able to replace any of those things. And if you can instill in the younger generations that, they will always have that outlook on life. And I think they will be pre-programmed to always walk more gently on this earth and to be teachers to everyone that they come across. Because as Indigenous people, I think that's one of the things that we forget, that is our role in this world, on this earth, on this land that we call, sometimes we refer to as Turtle Island. In Diné, we always say Dinetra. But we were given this traditional ecological knowledge. For Diné people, we know how to live in the Southwest. If you wipe out the indigenous people of any one region, that knowledge is wiped away with them. It is important to pass along as much of the ecological knowledge as possible so that people understand that moving resources from one place to another is not good for the environment. It's not good for the earth. Wherever you live in this world, wherever you live on this earth, you have to learn how to live sustainably. You have to learn to, can you generate your own energy there? How do you do it? Do you have enough water there? If you don't have enough water, you should not be trying to export it somewhere else. You should not be using it on industry that wastes and contaminate your water. Otherwise, you're going to be drinking it. So in every single place, you have the responsibility to learn to live in that place in a sustainable way. Because exporting resources, look what it's done to Diné and Hopi people in Northeast Arizona. We've been exporting our water, our coal, and we've been shouldering the cost of coal mining in Northeast Arizona so that the rest of the country can have cheap electricity and cheap water.
That's such a great message to end on, especially passing that down to the next generation. So thank you so much, Nicole. A lot of people are saying how inspiring you are in the chat. So we appreciate you being with us tonight. If you guys want to unmute and clap and just say thank you, we very much appreciate you spending this time with us tonight. And we look forward to supporting you. And I think we can support you in the ways that you suggested in terms of amplifying your message. So we definitely look forward to doing that. So
thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.